Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar weekly discussion topic video. And this one's basically going to be similar to a lot of the news videos I've done recently, but basically just a more discussion, opinion focused version of it, that being the future of Avatar comics, and I suppose the future of, the franchise in a way. Just kind of, should we be worried about the lack of communication about anything, and just what we know right now, what is and is not happening with regards to comics, and how important Dark Horse are effectively to the future of the franchise. So the big news is, of course, Gurihuru aren't working on Avatar comics anymore. They've done all of their work. Their last piece of art, the one that they teased, they confirmed that the piece of art is going to show up in full. The first time we get to see it is going to be in the North and South Library Edition. So that's going to be obviously the last piece, the last book release that's going to feature their art, and that's where their final big piece of art is going to be in. Now, obviously, I think we can assume at this point that that's going to be their kind of farewell piece of art in a way. It's going to feature the majority of the characters that they've done books on up to this point in time, and I assume it will be somewhat of a farewell type thing. Who knows? We might get an interview with Team Gurihuru in the extras in that book. They might just put up the image and maybe caption it so we know what it's about. So obviously people who maybe aren't aware of the announcement that they're not on the comics anymore read that book and then are aware that this is the last you're going to see of Team Gurihuru. So immediately the situation that this announcement has presented has obviously been a lot of negativity, kind of just disappointment within the fan base of one, sad to see Team Gurihuru go, of course, because their art has been such a crucial part of why the Avatar comics have been so successful. Everyone loves their art style. But also it felt like the final nail in the coffin with regards to oh, we have no idea what's happening with Avatar comics going forward. Now the one big consistent thing that we had, that being obviously our key creative team, Gene Yang and Team Gurihuru, they're not together anymore. And so that really consistent thing being gone it's oh, wow. Even the one thing we had hoped for that would stick together, even if they maybe were taking a break, that's broken up now, and we just have no idea what's happening with Avatar comics. Of course, Dark Horse have come out in little vague statements on Twitter, and saying that, yeah, we're focusing on Korra for now, but maybe in the future, there'll be Avatar stuff. Vague statements like that, but none of them have been anything concrete that yeah, we will for sure get back to Avatar comics. I really feel at this point whoever's kind of managing this in terms of what books are confirmed and how they're handling the franchise has almost made this mistake of oh, people want Korra comics, let's give it to them. They all are super excited about Korra Sami, and then they've got this announcement, but then there's also people really being very vocal about that I want Avatar comics, and it's almost like they don't get why people want both. It really feels that way, where wait, are you not happy that we're getting Korra comics? And it's just from our perspective, there is absolutely no logical reason for why we can't get both an Avatar comic and a Korra comic. So it's just always this question that never seems to be answered about why are you doing the things in this way? Why can you only ever have one Avatar project on the go at a time? And the fact that we've never had an answer to that question is so weird, and I think it has sort of taken them by surprise when they've had moments at New York Comic Con last year where they asked the audience, what sort of stuff do you want to see in upcoming comics? And I think they were expecting people to say all Korra stuff to kind of confirm to them Korra comics are what we want. I think they were taken by surprise when the majority of people at that panel asked for Avatar moments, and they wanted this, and this, covering stuff from Avatar. They almost felt we've given them 5 Avatar books already, they won't want any more, they want the core stuff now, when in fact, no, we want both. And it seems like it's just this impossible thing for Dark Horse that they don't get why the fandom would want that. I'm sure there's a reason for why they feel the need to only do one at a time, and that may speak to potentially some stuff with Nickelodeon and how Dark Horse have to use the license. It may even just speak to Mike and Brian, and that they have to be heavily involved in everything, and so that means only a select amount of stuff can actually happen. But especially with the Avatar comics, I very much have gotten the impression that outside of The Search and maybe The Promise as like the first Avatar comic, they haven't been like so involved with the comics that like they've spent tons of time, like especially like North and South. That really feels like a book where they didn't need to be massively involved throughout that book. But anyway, that's the kind of situation that we're in with Dark Horse, of just being very frustrated with them. And maybe some of that's misguided. I don't think most of it probably is Dark Horse. I think a lot, as we've kind of got reference to before, is that they often can't say anything because of Nick, because they obviously are the ones who like own the franchise. Hence why, like at the panel at New York Comic Con last year, one of the people on the panel was like the Nickelodeon kind of brand manager there at the panel with the Dark Horse people. And she was the one who was actually like kind of taking notes about what people were saying about what they want. So I think maybe Nickelodeon are the ones kind of maybe not taking the fire for some of the stuff that's actually happening here. But equally, I feel Dark Horse could attempt to be much more communicative with the fan base about what exactly is happening here. Because it's getting very, very frustrating now. I think you're beginning to see a lot of frustrated Avatar fans with regards to the timing on the Team Gurihuru announcement being so close to the start of Turf Wars. I can't imagine that that was planned, that that's when this announcement was meant to come out, because you're getting into this situation now where, like, I don't think the negativity around what's happening with Avatar comics is going to impact Turf Wars all that much, but it can't help things that people are kind of frustrated with Dark Horse heading into one of their biggest kind of comic releases of the year, probably, with how hyped Turf Wars actually is. In that, I think you do have some people who maybe aren't aware of the full details around what's happening, who are maybe being like, I'm not going to get the core comic because I don't want to support something that has taken away Avatar comics, even though that doesn't appear to be necessarily what's happened. But because Dark Horse haven't just come out and said exactly what's happening, it's just this really frustrating situation that just no one knows what's going on. And then the other thing that I think is important to bring up is just the amount of releases that we have coming out. In that, yes, Turf Wars is coming out, but the week before Turf Wars, I believe it's the core coloring book, which is the only like other kind of piece of merchandise that we have announced, really. But that's not really going to get people's attention because it's just a coloring book. The art's going to be cool, and it just feels like it's going to be one of those things where it's like cool to have it, but no one's going to be talking about the coloring book all that much. It's just going to come and go, and that's that. Turf Wars is going to come out. We know Turf Wars Part 2, Turf Wars Part 3, Turf Wars hardcover, and then of course we also have the North and South hardcover library edition as well coming out. But that's everything we know. It is definitely the issue right now that we just don't know what the future of like either comic is, because Avatar is the one like directly now where we are dealing with the fact that we have all of the content that we know is coming. The end of North and South was the end of like everything that was announced for Avatar comics. Anything else, we don't know what's coming, and we want to know what's coming next. Whereas with Turf Wars, like, it hasn't started yet, so we know that there's at least this first comic to come. But then, if you've been following like Irene Coe on social media, you'll know that she's like said multiple times, basically at this point, that she is only staying on board for Turf Wars. I don't think there's really anything Dark Horse can do to like really convince her to stay on for like another core comic trilogy. And that's just the way things are going to go. It very much comes across that like she wanted to work on the franchise, but doesn't want to like be the regular kind of artist on the franchise. That she just came in kind of as a fill-in, kind of, you know, almost desperate Dark Horse needing an artist, and she was happy to fill in. And once this is done, that's all she really wants to do. And that's fine. It's just that's also going to leave the core comics in the position that we're in with Avatar comics. That's going to take more or less like a year to get to the point where we're at now. But it speaks to the fact that we kind of now know more or less that unless they make big announcements, what next year for the fandom is going to look like. You can almost copy and paste the start of this year into the start of next year, and that's the position we're going to be in, but with Korra comics. Turf Wars will be approaching the end, in that we'll have the part 2 come out, and usually for all the other comics, when they were regular, it'd be in or around the release of part 2, heading into the part 3 stuff, that we would get the announcement of what the next comic series is. And that's not going to happen, it seems, for Korra comics as well. And that's what they need now. That we're in such a weird position now where we need a new Avatar artist. That's what we need right now. We don't know what Yin Yang's status is. Soon we will be needing a new Korra artist, but we don't even know if they have plans to do more Korra comics. And just overall, it feels like, at least right now, that just content being in any way regular for the fan base for Avatar and Korra is just kind of going away. And that's why I feel they absolutely need to announce something at one of the conventions coming up. Whether that be SDCC or NYCC, they have to make some sort of an announcement about what's coming. I don't care really how early this announcement is. I don't think they have to announce an Avatar comic and then just say it's out in a couple of months. But they, I think, have to put it in the fans' minds that they care about both sides of the fan base. That they're not leaving Avatar behind to focus on Korra, and vice versa. I think it'd be so positive for the fan base to have confirmation that both series will be continuing. And I would obviously much prefer it if they managed to do it in a way where they were more or less being released kind of side by side. You get 2 comic creative teams in, and we have 6 books a year coming out instead of the usual 3. And immediately I think that will really help things, in that you're covering both sides of the fan base. Because there are people out there who much prefer Korra to Avatar, and there are a lot of people who care about the Avatar stuff and don't massively care about Korra. I think that's probably the bigger group. The bigger group, I think, for sure, is the people who care about Avatar and don't necessarily focus on Korra. But I understand why they want, at least at this point in time, for the next month or two, to focus on Turf Wars, because it is going to be such a huge book for Dark Horse. But, as we know, SDCC is going to basically happen in or around the release of Turf Wars, and they are going to have an early release of the book at the convention, and then the following week the book actually comes out. And I think it's after Turf Wars Part 1 hits, that's when you just need to be like, okay, we've got up to the release of this book, now we can announce other stuff. So I can maybe see it where SDCC is more of a just celebration of Turf Wars release, and they maybe don't go for the news. But I feel NYCC at the very least has to be some sort of a, the future of the comics. Because it's getting, I think, very frustrated now, because I don't think it's time to panic just yet in terms of the future of the franchise. But I think if we don't hear anything after, if New York Comic Con comes and goes and we don't hear anything about the future of the comics, that's probably about time to worry. If we're not hearing any rumors or anything like that about a new Avatar book in the planning, the future of Korra comics being kind of put into place, that's probably in around the time when we should be growing concerned and start asking the big questions to Dark Horse. If we hit, I think, Turf Wars Part 2 coming out with no news, that's probably we could be going a decent amount of time with just no content. And then that is the point at which you're just wow, do you even care about this franchise? And what is actually happening here? How do you have this big license that has been so successful for you, and you're just not using it effectively? But I think that's more or less all I want to say. It's just, basically asking the question of how do you feel at this point in time about where we are with Avatar and Korra comics? Do you feel the future that we're just kind of waiting for an announcement? Do you feel that they're just waiting a little bit to make any sort of these announcements, or do you actually feel we are stopping Avatar comics for a while. They don't have a plan for Korra comics after this, and that we could get a very long break with no new stuff from Dark Horse. Personally, like, just looking at, I suppose, where the Avatar comics have left off at this point in time, and the fact that the whole Azula thing is wide open, I can't see them just leaving that where it is. I think that is an awful kind of point to just leave off the story. Because I feel like North and South is not a good end point for like Avatar stories. Because it leaves so much that's just very unsatisfying. And that, yes, there has steps over the course of the 5 comics have been made towards getting towards Republic City and what it is. I don't feel they've made the big step to like make it like incredibly clear how that's happening. In that I don't think North and South focus at all enough on making those connections. So it's stuff like that I don't feel the comics left off in any way on a point connecting the series enough. And then the Azula story, I think, is important enough that you do need to tell it at some point. I've seen a lot of people mentioning that like maybe they're just leaving it open to interpretation, that they just want to leave this mystery arc for the character. But I feel they've touched on it way too much. Like, let's not forget, Azula was reintroduced at the end of The Promise, the first Avatar comic series. She's been a more or less kind of ever-present in the comics, even though hasn't been the focus of like all of them. She's been there in a decent amount of them. She's at the end of The Promise, she's a focus in The Search. She's not really in The Rift. She is a focus in Smoke and Shadow. And then where they leave off Smoke and Shadow, I think it's a very clear setup for something still to come. That I know a lot of people have been trying to say it's like, oh, well, Azula's just kind of using like reverse psychology on Zuko. She's trying to force him, like overly force him to be like she used to be, but she knows that he's not going to do that, and so her forcing him to be the evil guy is going to like double him down on trying to be the good guy. And I'm just like, yes, but I don't think Azula is at the point where she is actively trying to stop someone from being like the whole control through fear thing. I think Azula still believes in that, and because that's what she's basically trying to force Zuko into, I don't think that reverse psychology angle on the situation is like the correct way to view it. Because they haven't presented Azula as being like clear enough to, I think, understand that controlling people through fear is the wrong way. I don't think she's had that big moment just yet. And just the fact that she hasn't talked to her mother yet, we haven't really seen much Ki and Azula interaction, and all these other sort of things, that she's not really in a good position with Zuko either. You do need to, I think, actually address that story. And so if they do a time skip at some point, which I think is probably what they will have to do if they are getting a new artist, just so it doesn't look weird that you have Team Gurihuru that's covered this time period, and then you have a new artist jumping on, trying to use the designs for the Team Gurihuru characters at like where they are now. Whereas I think like a year or two time skip, you can give the characters kind of new outfits with a new artist, kind of have them do their designs, and it doesn't look as weird because they're covering the characters at a different stage in their lives. And so this probably is a natural point to switch things up. I think, you know, the only criticism, if there has been one, of Team Gurihuru's style is that maybe their style doesn't portray the characters' ages all that well, in that it very much makes them look very young, and trying to get across the characters growing up and kind of being older, maybe that hasn't come through as well in their art, and maybe a different artist can showcase that a lot better, and it's the perfect time to perhaps do that. But that is just complete speculation. We don't know if they're doing a time skip. It would make sense that they kind of covered that stuff, and that I think most fans want to see stuff more into the future where they're older and you can do a bit more with the characters. Right now, everyone still feels too young to properly like go crazy with the relationships and properly have like the marriages happening and so on. But that's pretty much where I want to end the video. So in the comments, as I said before, let me know what your thoughts are at this point in time on Avatar comics, Korra comics, and just the future, I suppose, of the franchise. Are you feeling very down about this recent Gurihuru announcement, or do you think there is still kind of, I suppose, hope for the future that we will get an announcement at the Comic-Cons this year and they're just waiting to make those announcements? Or do you think it is actually a really bad point for the fandom? But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.